Matty, the one and only, the champion, the stunning, brave, and beautiful madman. He is going to talk to us about Starfield. Break it down for us. He follows it much closer than I do. I've kind of checked out. People have been asking me, Luke, where's the 3-hour critique of Starfield? I'm like, bro, I'd like to make it, but the game sucks my soul out through my fingertips. So much so, it's actually started to like corrupt me. See, my nail is black. That's where my soul has been sucked out of because I've tried to play Starfield too much. So Maddie's followed it closer. Let's see what, if anything, has happened or changed. There were rumors recently that the Starfield DLC was going to be announced soon, but I guess we're going to find out.
I think it's fair to say I've kept the spirit of positivity surrounding Starfield. I don't do it because I feel I have to, but because I genuinely enjoyed the game. Many people misinterpret that as me trying to be the glass half full guy when I'm just looking at it as it is, as I enjoyed that glass of water, if you will. And so I had fun with.
I also don't think it's bad to be a glasses half full guy. Like, I do the podcast with Joe Raptor. The thing I love about Joe Raptor is that with a lot of games that I'm just like, nope, sucks, he's able to look at it as a glass is half full. He's like, oh, this glass is half full and it's warm. Maybe like coffee or something. It's good. I can get enjoyment out of this, even if it's only a half full glass. I'm still glad to have it. And I'm like, I don't care. I paid for a whole glass and it's half full. I'm pissed off. Like, you know those friends that you go to the coffee shop with and you order your coffee, like they get their coffee and it's like a venti, whatever. And then you get yours and the barista made a grande but put it in a venti cup. And so you have like 3-4 inches of just air in this cup that you paid $35 for, or whatever Starbucks costs now. And like, I paid for this. I'm already upset that I paid so much for this drink. So I'm going to get my money's worth and I'm going to ask them, hey, I paid for a venti. Can you please make a venti? I'm that guy. So I'm sure waitresses and baristas get annoyed with me, but I'm like, hey, I paid like $8 for a coffee. You can at least make it proportional to the cup. But Joe Raptor will be like, this chai is delicious. I'm happy. Even if it's only a little, I'm okay. And I'll go over it. I'll freak out.
Starfield, and I've never been afraid to say that, but I also had a lot of optimism for Starfield's future. You know, I've approached it like a live service product, for better or for worse. That's how I've looked at it. Bethesda's committed to years of updates, and I know this
is a bold editing move to leave the load screen in there. Maybe that's a subtle jab or something. I don't know. Normally when I'm cutting together videos, or I have Jacob cut together videos most of the time, I will ask him to like cut out load screens, cut out kind of dead air, dead space on the screen. But sometimes we've left them in because it's funny, especially with Starfield. Like you're talking about how slow the game is, and then you just throw like load screen after load screen after load screens. But in this case, it's just funny. I don't know if it was intentional, but I think it's funny,
if you will. And so I had fun with Starfield, and I've never been afraid to say that, but I also had a lot of optimism for Starfield's future. You know, I've approached it like a live service product, for better or for worse. That's how I've looked at it. Bethesda's committed to years of updates, and I know this may be a video that could eventually age like milk, but I have to talk about it as it is now as we approach the half-year mark, which is crazy since Starfield's release. We just made a video last week talking about Starfield 5 months later, which many people in the comments were surprised, going, what? Really? And also many people playing games since Starfield have said that it feels like Starfield has aged considerably already, which is not a good sign. But
I mean, I think the most damning thing for Starfield was that it launched right next to Baldur's Gate 3 and Phantom Liberty, both of which made it look ridiculous. I mean, it looked 10 years old instantaneously in terms of like the RPG mechanics and stuff. Granted, Baldur's Gate is exceptionally good in the purest form. It is exceptional. It's an exception to so many of these, but still, like, it launched next to that, which made the narrative look terrible. And then it launched next to Phantom Liberty, which is a technical marvel. Like, that game looks and plays amazingly well. It's just so good. So it really was like a pretty good painting that you did that you're really proud of, but you put it next to like Monet. And then on the other side, you have like a drawing from one of those guys that can do like photorealistic pencil drawings. And you can't even tell it's not a picture. It looks like a picture, but it's done with pencil. And you're like, your painting is okay, but next to those, you look dumb. And that's basically what Starfield did for themselves, releasing when they did.
Other people's opinions aside, what I want to talk about today is the sad state I found Starfield in. As someone who enjoys the game, mind you, I know this could easily get spun into a super negative piece, and don't get me wrong, it'll be critical, But I'm looking at it as a fan who wants to go back and enjoy new things Bethesda's adding, and the pace at which updates are coming out, I think is fine. What's being added when you look at what was initially promised, which I'll bring up here. We've been reading all your feedback. We're going to start launching these new features, new ways to travel, city maps. For those of you who love shipbuilding, we're going to be expanding that with decoration options. New gameplay options is in the second paragraph. You'll be able to alter your difficulty. They talk about things like cargo capacity, carry capacity, ship damage, vendor credits, afflictions. They talk about survival mechanics. And in the bottom paragraph, they mention official mod support coming to Starfield with the launch of Creations early next year.
And I'm pretty sure none of that is in the game. I don't think there's even city maps yet. Maybe we'll talk about that. But I don't think there's even city maps. You guys remember when the game launched and everybody was like, how on earth did this release without maps of the city? It's madness. Mod support, it's too late. Should have been there day one. Well, a lot of people are worried that the mod support is going to be sort of like the half-ass thing where it's going to be like, yeah, you can have mods, but it's mostly paid mods that are available to people on console, and that's it. And you know, if that's all it is, that's going to suck. I think Starfield's just a particularly tough thing because it can't be modded in the same way that players, I think, were hoping for it to be modded. People were like, oh, they'll just quickly mod in the ability to freely roam across planets and freely, like they'll mod it so that you can go in and maybe fly between planets without having to fast travel, and we'll mod those out. And that's just not how it works. No part of it works. And I think that that's why a lot of modders have given up on it, because it's just frankly more fun to go work on like another Skyrim mod versus this, you know.
So I have to imagine that a lot of this stuff should be arriving soon. But when I saw the March update for Starfield, it was one of those moments where I went, what are we doing? Like, why? I hate to sound like that kind of gamer because many people know I don't approach my coverage that way. But truly, I looked at the Starfield update, which we're going to go through today, and then talk a little bit more about the aftermath. And I went, what are we doing and why is it taking so long? I think
it's fair to be upset though. Also, holy God almighty, look at this water bottle. Matty hydrates, my boy. Well done. I tried to get one of these like Yeti. It's like an actual gallon. It comes in like a pail, like the big handle. I don't know if you guys have seen those. It's like an actual jug with a big old handle. It's like this big around. It's awesome. But yeah, look at this. it's outrageous. It works very well. It keeps you very, very hydrated. Look how monstrous that thing is. That's on the scale of this. This is crazy. Maddie's not slacking when it comes to hydration. I need to be better about that. I just drink coffee all day, every day. That's all I do. But that, I mean, that's tremendous.
I think part of the reason I feel that way more so is when it was Bethesda Game Studios independently, I thought to myself, okay, it's just them. They are a smaller team compared to most AAA efforts. Therefore, things may move a little slower than we're typically used to. But the market has sped up since between Fallout 4 and Starfield, between Fallout 76 and Starfield, where people demand content sooner. And when you have Microsoft/Xbox at your back, and they put everyone in QA on Starfield, and Starfield did have, whether it was critically received well or not, or fan reception was good or not, it did really well. The player base is there, where I thought Bethesda was going to hammer home updates quick. Now, I'm willing to be forgiving of the 2023 window after launch, patch the game up, right? Figure some things out, create a roadmap, create a plan. You look at the top of the year, they've had some pretty sizable patches. I mean, seriously, take a scroll through the list that you're seeing on screen here. There's a lot in these patches, and I'm not going to poo-poo any of that. But what I will say is what's going to draw more people back in or have people give the game a second chance is new features, especially addressing feedback. For me, seeing the millionth Starfield update with a laundry list of fixes, you know what it reminds me of? And I wouldn't say this game was nearly as broken at launch, but it reminds me of Cyberpunk, where you just see this long list of quest fixes, art fixes, gameplay fixes, but no real new mechanics, if you will.
I think the difference, like Starfield was the best optimized Bethesda game I've ever played. Like, I think far and away. It was very, very impressive. Maybe you guys in chat can can either back me up or correct me on this, but I feel like Starfield ran way better than any other Bethesda game I had ever played, especially in the first like 15 hours. It was very well polished and optimized. That being said, like the Cyberpunk was a broken disaster. Like no matter where you went in that game, it was broken. So it made sense why they put off everything else while they fixed it, worked on it, and then once it was running pretty well, they went into new content updates, and they added in Phantom Liberty. They do the 2.0 update and then the 2.1 update, and they do all this crazy stuff, and it really starts to snowball quickly. I'm hoping something like that can happen with Starfield. I just think for Starfield, the frustrations people have go beyond mere technical issues and stuff. With Cyberpunk, everybody loved the game, but they hated the experience the game gave them, because it was like, I don't know. It was just a gem in a pile of crap, and you had to sift through and dig through a bunch of crap to get to the diamond. And once you got to the diamond, you were happy because you're like, "Oh, a diamond! This is awesome! I really am glad I did this." But you still kind of smell like crap, and you're covered in crap because it was buried in crap. And with Starfield, I feel like there's not really that much crap that it's in, but it's like it's just like a concrete pad, and then there's maybe some like dust and dirt sprinkled over, like a 3-year-old fruit roll up. And so you get to it, you open it up, and you're like, okay, well, it's probably okay. I'm sort of glad I did this. Like, it's cool to see the old artwork. Like, oh, maybe it's like I got a movie tie-in promotion thing. It's like, oh wow, look at that, that's cool. Like, but that's the whole thing with Starfield. There's not that there's a diamond in the rough. There's nothing like that. It's like, it's okay, and it's sort of in the rough. It just isn't the same thing. Was that a messy analogy? I agree.
And the reason I'm making
we
this
got
video
lost
now
in the
is,
sauce
again,
a little
you
bit.
go back to the promise that was made, which was, for example, at the top of the new year, beginning early next year. We're now in March, and we already have the March update, and it's going to be another 6 weeks or so until we get another Starfield update. And yes, you see that Creations is supposed to be launching then. And I think this is very much pivotal to the lifespan of Starfield. I'm not one of those doomers that I've seen videos on acting like Starfield's modding community is dead. There's a shit ton of mods already, and it's only going to grow more with the addition of the modding kit. We'll see how far things can go, but I strongly believe, like with every previous Bethesda Game Studios game, that the gaps will be filled once more by modders. So until there's real true reason to have extreme concern about that, I'm not doing on that front. But the one thing I would say is, Bethesda, clock's ticking. You got modders that are kind of abandoning your project to go work on like older IP, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and you need to draw them to your new product, because they're going to push you forward just like they've pushed you forward for Fallout, like they've pushed you forward for Elder Scrolls. Like, you kind of need to be on that. So I have to say, I thought the modding kit would be out by this point in time.
Also, it feels like to me, if you say early 2024, it feels like that has to be in the first quarter of the year, right? After the first quarter of the year, I don't think you can still say it's early. Like, if it's the first half of the year, just say it's the first half of the year. Yeah, it's coming out in the first half of the year. Okay. But it feels like after 3 months, it's no longer early 2024. Like, we're in the middle of the year at that point, right? Or am I just like being a bugaboo? But it feels like early, I immediately think at the latest end of March. But apparently, like, they're not bringing a lot of this stuff until probably April, May, June. Like, it's crazy.
It's disappointing to see that's not the case. But more than anything, you look at some of the features in this newest update. Photo mode, new expressions and poses on the player and companions in photo mode. Scanner, this is a solid one. You can open doors and harvest with the scanner open, so you don't gotta put it away, interact, but not like a real big deal, right? Other options here. Setting course on an inactive quest will now make it active. Added support for adjusting FOV when using third-person ship view. Added a quality slider on PC. Removed the digipick cost for using undo during the security minigame. Added an autosave when fast traveling from a planet's surface to orbit. It's crazy that actually wasn't in the game in the first place. And updated the ship UI to perform more smoothly at higher frame rates. Again, look, if this was Bethesda on their own, I'd be like, all right, fine, let them cook. But you look at some of these updates, guys, you have Xbox at your back. Like, people were expecting a pretty big push after Starfield came out. I'm just leveling at this point, man. Like,
I mean, Phil Spencer said that he had assigned, I forget the name of the team, but there's like a specific team within Xbox that specializes on like software optimization and polish and QA basically. And he said that they were working on Starfield in the lead up to the game's launch, which is probably part of the reason that it was the most. I agree. Somebody, I forget, it got buried in chat, but somebody said it wasn't really optimized. It was Kinomansky. Optimized, polished maybe, but not optimized. PC performance is not the best. I agree. I should clarify. Polished, not necessarily optimized. So they had a group of devs and the team that they put on the game in the lead up to its launch that was specifically trying to polish the game and sort out QA issues. I don't think they're still working on the game. I think they worked through launch and maybe a little bit after launch to help iron out some issues. But I would highly doubt that Xbox still has teams of engineers working on this. If anything, they've probably reassigned that team to go work on something like Hellblade 2 or an upcoming game that is going to be the next big thing, because the whole model around Game Pass is that they have a big release that generates some hype that justifies the subscription for people in their mind, and the only time that they'll continue to really work on games, it seems, is when that game generates long-term playership. And Starfield, I think, has the potential to do that, but it's more content updates, not stuff that the QA team would necessarily be working on. So like maybe they do still have people at Xbox helping polish and refine the game and do bug fixes like this stuff, but I would not expect that to overlap with the production of like actual content. That seems like something that is purely up to Bethesda and is more on them for dropping the ball on.
Like, there was a much larger expectation for post-launch support. So the question is, what's going on? Where is it? When's it going to happen? I don't think Bethesda's abandoned anything for what it's worth. And that's why I said this video could eventually age like milk. But what I will say is, I believe, if I were to wager a guess, what is the plan for Bethesda right now? I think modding will come out within the next month. It has to. It has to sooner rather than later. It's already pretty urgent. I think it's even more urgent when you get into the month of April. I do think Bethesda may be sitting on their bigger updates and additions. Why is that? I do think back to that wave of criticism that slammed them outside the release of Starfield, right? I mean, it wasn't just a couple of people. If you search Starfield on YouTube, I'm sure all you will find is extremely critical videos of the game. Any recommended Starfield video to me has not been positive. Okay.
Sorry, Maddie. Sorry. It's probably me. I'm sorry. I'm still so shocked that we're in this spot, because a year ago, people were like, no, Starfield's probably going to be pretty good. I mean, the hype was starting to get a little out of control. You guys remember, the hype was a little crazy. It was a little crazy. And like, there were some times we put out videos on like the main channel. I remember putting out videos and segments on this Luke Stevens live channel. And there were people that were not particularly nice about it. People started losing their absolute minds. And then the game launched. And once again, we saw hype makes you stupid. Hype kind of drives you a little crazy. Hype puts blinders on and you start to say and do some silly things. And we started to see it. I mean, it just got pretty outrageous. But it's why, like, keeping a level head, being a little more critical can take you very, very far in life. You just have to be very consistent. And if you're consistent, you can go a long way, and you'll be shocked at how often your impressions and opinions on games end up being validated.
Okay. And that's just the honest truth of the matter. People had a lot of hopes for Starfield, and in many cases, on a critical level, it did not deliver to people. And even if I enjoyed it a lot, I get where people are coming from, and you need to address those people. So if you're Bethesda, do you piecemeal those updates? Do you gradually roll them out? Or do you wait when people are looking at your game again, and not just covering it on like a basis I may be doing, when people are looking at your game again and say, hey, a lot of this stuff has just been added to the game. What do I mean by that? We know Shattered Space is coming this year. At the end of year update for Starfield, they confirmed at the bottom of the blog post that Starfield is coming at the end of 2024. Okay, great. So you got to show that off sooner rather than later. I think it's a pretty safe bet, since Xbox has already confirmed their summer showcase, that Starfield's Shattered Space expansion will reveal itself here.
Reveal itself. Love it. Maddie actually in I think it was one of his recent videos, he broke down something that was really, really interesting to me, which was just the difference in pace for Fallout 4 updates versus Starfield. Like Starfield at this point has been out for over, what was it? It was like late August, early September. So September, October, November, December, January, February. Now we're into March. So it's been out for over 6 months, which is already crazy. The time's flown by that fast, but it's been out for over 6 months. And Fallout 4 at this same time, it released in November. So November, December, January, February, March, April. So by April, they had already gotten 2 pretty sizable updates. And by the end of the 7th month, they got Far Harbor, which was a pretty sizable DLC update with all sorts of narrative content. And I think it's the best part of Fallout 4, honestly. And then within just, a few more months that we'd gotten Nuka World. So by the time the game hit its 1-year anniversary, there were all of these DLC updates and content updates and 2 narrative expansions as well. And with Starfield so far, we've gotten nothing. And by the time that we get to the year mark, we might have Shattered Space. Hopefully we'll have Shattered Space. And maybe some little things here and there, but there really has not been any sizable update or content drops for the game, which is just very surprising. Because again, they promised like city maps, they promised to have new ways of traversing, which everybody was like, okay, so vehicles and like motorbikes and stuff, and there's just nothing. There's nothing. You guys are saying he'll get there? Okay. Okay, Juice. Sharded Space. Okay, that's funny. You got me. Sharded Space. Okay, that's a layup. If the game, if the expansion ends up being terrible, that's what we'll call it. Oh, that's a layup. Oh, that's right there. Oh, wow.
What would be a good way to get people into the Starfield mood and say, hey, look at all the things we've done thus far? Tell them, hey, this big update, it dropped right now, and it's free, and it adds X, Y, and Z. Right now, again, you go back to this end of year update and they mention things like the city maps. They mention new features like new ways to travel, new gameplay options. And I don't know if all of this is going to hit at once, right? This is kind of their plan for what I think is the year. So I don't think all of this is going to hit at once. But what if a massive update hits Starfield around the timing of them announcing Shattered Space? You have that there, and now you have the attention and maybe a little more optimism building once more. Right now, does Bethesda truly stand to gain if they put out a couple of great free updates and people across Reddit, Twitter, maybe a video or 2 from me and other people still playing Starfield look at it and go like, hey, this is pretty good. Yeah, you might want to check it out. Or do you wait for the moment with the big pop? And if you're Bethesda, I think you can kind of win either way, but I think the latter has a bigger payoff if you start to address those real concerns.
I absolutely agree. I actually think the slow drip would just be a mistake flat out, because I think in the age of TikTok and YouTubers and toxic people like you and me, I think the key is to make a big splash, get content creators to try the update and promote it, and then you'll get some buzz. And if it actually is improved significantly, you'll see a big payoff from that. So what I would do is, for one, transparency and discussions have to be much better. Like, they have to communicate clearly. If the Creation Club or Creations, whatever the mod thing is called, I think it's Creations, if that's not coming out in the early part of 2024, be clear and be like, it's coming in the middle of the year. You have to be very precise. Like, you can't keep screwing up and misstating things. Beyond that, I would probably look at doing a big like Starfield 2.0 update. Frame it like that. This is a massive update. We're adding all of this stuff people have been asking for and some other stuff they didn't even know they wanted. And we're bringing Shattered Space. So it's going to be a big narrative expansion. All of this stuff, it's going to be amazing. Everybody's going to love it. If they did that, I'm going to make a video on it. Maddie's going to make videos on it. Everybody's going to try the update and see if it actually is that good. And if it is actually improved and significantly better, players will start the game again, go through from the very beginning, and then you see that renaissance of the game really take off. And I think you started to see that towards the end of the Cyberpunk 2077 sort of fix life cycle, where they did these big, like, I think it was the 1.5 update. Was that the big one? They did like a 1.4 update, and then they did the 2.0 update, which was totally reworked and everything. And then the 2.1 update, then Phantom Liberty. And each time it was like a very recognizable, easily marketable thing. This is a huge leap. It's going to be great. And I think that that's one way to combat what Fearless Wolf is saying, which is that it's forgettable. I think little updates are very forgettable, but big updates at least can make a splash and potentially drive some attention. Fearless, thank you for the 10 great British pounds. Appreciate you, my friend. Its problem is it's forgettable. That's why Skyrim, ME, Mass Effect, and Fallout are all great because of the pacing, world characters, and stories. Starfield doesn't have that. It's more like a chore, and Todd's sales sucks. I mean, I do think it's surprising that there's not really a clear hook for Starfield. Like, the way it was described to me was that, I forget who it was. It was somebody that covers a lot of Bethesda stuff. I don't think it was Matty, but I saw a TikTok from them, and it was like, I'm trying to find a way to describe Starfield that's really easily identifiable. And I feel like with Elder Scrolls, whether it's Skyrim or Oblivion or Morrowind, you can always point to one thing and it pops in your head and it's very recognizable. And it's like, that is Skyrim's thing. You know, it could be with Skyrim, it's the really unique leveling system, or it's looking to the stars to level up and stuff, the really unique UI. There's all these things that it does really, really well. That are just really good, and the open sandbox thing. And with like Fallout, we have VATS and we have all of these other systems that are very unique to it, and the Pip-Boy. But with Starfield, it just feels like it's Fallout in space, but like a worse version of Fallout. You know, there's just nothing really that it does great. And my problem with Starfield that I mentioned in my review back late last year was that there is nothing Starfield does better than its competitors, like than its peers. There's nothing it does better. There's, no matter what feature you look at, another game right next to it does it far better. Not just a little, but far better. There's nothing that Starfield does that it's the best at. And I don't think that that's been the case for most Bethesda games in the past. Bethesda's amazing at world building, at set building, at telling stories through the world design and through things you discover in the environments, also known as like environmental storytelling. And in Starfield, that's pretty much entirely gone because it's so formulaic and it's just locations copy and pasted across the map, and there's just very, very little that's truly unique about it. And I think a big DLC expansion could help with that, but yeah, the shipbuilding is really good. I will give you that. Maybe shipbuilding is the one thing you could say that it does better than its competitors, because granted I've not played much of like late game No Man's Sky, but at least Starfield's shipbuilder seems to be really, really good. But if we make 2.0s the norm, companies will be further incentivized to release now, fix later. How do we stop that? I don't think they'll be incentivized to do it, because a game is going to be much more successful if you just do it right the first time. The thing with 2.0s is like most dev companies would rather not to have to make a 2.0 at all, because a 2.0 can take a year or two of dev time that you could have spent working on a sequel or working on DLC you're going to charge for separately. You know, doing a 2.0 update, spending 2 years, 3 years developing that and trying to fix the game when it should have just been good to begin with, that can take the form of hundreds of millions of dollars wasted, you know. And there was a real, I remember reading an article from an analyst that specifically specialized in like video games and online entertainment and media. And this was probably back in like early 2021. And the article basically was arguing that Cyberpunk's developers, CD Projekt Red, should walk away from Cyberpunk and just move on straight to The Witcher 4. They're like, it was poorly received. People didn't like it. Move on. Don't waste money trying to fix it. You put out The Witcher 4, people will still love it. People will still buy it. Doesn't matter. The goodwill is just, it's a big hullabaloo. It doesn't really matter. But to their credit, they worked on it for years to fix it. And that 2.0 update, like, they didn't most likely make back any of the money they spent fixing the game. They probably got some added sales through word of mouth and stuff. But usually it was on sale on a discount and stuff. And, you know, I don't think that they necessarily made back the money they were looking for, or that they spent on it. And I think that's to their credit that they still did it, even though it might not have been the best financial decision. And investors probably would have preferred that they just moved on, you know.
Especially if the one thing we're not talking about, we're all going over free updates, is what does Shattered Space bring into the picture, right? What is that going to address, if anything at all? Because I feel like you have to have these smaller, free, incremental upgrades throughout the lifespan of the game year by year, but then the expansions have to bring new planets, new cities, new features, new mechanics. Like, they have to bring the big guns out. So what does Shattered Space bring out that maybe was missing from the base game is what I'm keen to see. And that's where I think things lie right now. But there's no denying that Starfield, I think in its current state, it's pretty sad, especially as we covered in our 5 months later video for Starfield. I look at Fallout 4 and how quickly DLC came out. And yes, I'm not going to have rose-tinted glasses. I was complaining up a storm at how much workshop DLC Bethesda was doing. But we also got things like the Automatron DLC. We got Far Harbor. We got Nuka World. And that was in...
Yeah, and I know back in the day, like, people were upset that these updates were just, and these DLC were small, like, improvements to the crafting stuff or this or that. And it felt like stuff that was cut out of the base game to be sold back later. And whether it was or not, I'm not sure. But it was still content updates. It was still new stuff. Like, at the very least, if with Starfield, they did like, okay, for $5, we're bringing... all new, like, craftable habitats and stuff, and you can do this and this and this, and you know, that would at least be something. But with Starfield so far, it's all just been bug fixes and things like that.
Like, what, a 5 to 6 month span? It's almost been 6 months, and Starfield has got nothing. It is definitely disappointing. I can be sympathetic and understanding to maybe after Starfield launched, the team took a break, got back into the swing of things, pushed out a couple of final updates for the year. But it's not even just me zeroing in on this single update. One of the last updates for the year for Starfield in 2023 was maybe like 3 or 4 bullet points long. It just felt like the team was scratching and clawing their way out of an arduous year and had to reset mentally, which again, I can sympathize with, but I am just reading from the outside looking in, speculating pretty heavily here, pretty liberally here. But I will just say that I think these updates need to be more. As a fan of Starfield, I look at them and I'm not going back to it. I'll be real, like, I don't give a shit about photo mode, man. Like, why is that a targeted feature right now? Why are you not targeting exploration? Why are you not targeting fun gameplay options? Why aren't you targeting survival mechanics? Like, why is it little, I guess, bullshit features that are being targeted first? I get cleaning up bugs and fixes, like, that should be as big a priority, of course, to make Starfield as polished as it can be. But why on a feature level are things like photo mode being targeted initially? Like, save that for later when you're close to the release of Shattered Space. Like, that's not, in my opinion, nearly as urgent.
One thing could be that they have, it seems like Bethesda is very segmented, so they have different teams working on different things. And so when they're working on fixes and stuff, they probably assign it to each individual team. So, you know, the combat team will handle combat fixes, and the team that handles in-game, like, dynamic systems will be handling those when they break. And, you know, so you have each individual team working on fixing their own thing that they specialize in, which kind of makes sense. Like, if you know this thing because you built it, you're the one to fix it versus some other guy that's gonna have to come in and figure out how it works. It very well could be something as simple as that. It's just like, yeah, the guy that did the photo mode, his fix was really simple. It was on his to-do list. He fixed it. Boom. So it ends up in the patch notes. Whereas, like, you know, fixing something like survival mechanics might be a lot more complicated because there's a lot more moving parts when it comes to survival mechanics or combat fixes and things and exploration fixes, because those are so vast. You know, it's not that easy to just go in and change things around. It's just fascinating to me. Again, if you rewind the clocks a year, I don't think anybody would have thought we'd be in this spot. I think everybody would have assumed that Starfield still would be kind of the talk of the town, but instead it's really kind of fallen off a cliff in terms of engagement. There's still people playing it. You can see on Steam DB, people are still playing it. Thousands and thousands of people are still playing it, but it seems to be a very dedicated group. It's not the mass market appeal game that I think people thought it would be.
Scanner update, I can get behind. You know, that one is solid because that is something that was annoying, just putting things away, taking it out. So good quality of life there. But I think we're at the point where we should have seen at least, and I don't think I'm greedy for saying this, one decent new feature to the game. That I'm talking is like that new way of exploring, or that new survival mechanic, or that new gameplay mode.
Freaking
like
city maps.
Something new should have been ready by this point in time, in my opinion. If you've had over 5 months, not that they haven't fixed things, but you get my point. You know, I think there should have been something at this point in the game's lifespan that goes, oh, okay, we're trending in a certain direction now. It still feels like we're in month 1, month 2 with some of these updates. So let me know if I'm crazy down below. I'm wondering if you're
crazy. You've lost your mind. I'm glad to see Matty trying to call them out a little bit for this, because I think they don't generally care that much what more skeptical people say. I'm also going to relink the video in chat just so everybody can go give it some love. Go sub to Matty. It's good that we're now seeing even like fans of BGS and fans of these games come out and be like, guys, come on. It's been half a year and there's still just not much discussion about it. Like, there really just is not much here, because at least we know that like Todd and the team at BGS, they do watch like Matty's stuff. They do hear what these creators say. They probably kind of go into a bit of an echo chamber. They don't tend to hear a whole lot of what other creators are saying. If they're more critical, we've seen that in some dev interviews where they've talked about like, yeah, and the people that have negative feedback, you just got to ignore them and just focus on what you're doing. I'm like, it's kind of bad when you're just trying to ignore criticism, but okay. But, yeah, I think it's good that Matty's talking about it. I think it's good to see. And my hope is that they can continue to improve the game, but it's going to probably be made or broken based on the feedback and how quickly they can get actual content out. Because bug fixes are fine, but bug fixes are kind of in their nature. They're not very exciting. They're not very interesting. It's just kind of meh. You know, it's like, okay, well, you did the thing that shouldn't have been a problem to begin with, so congratulations. But people expect more.